This is Kevin Given, reading Chapter 1 of my novel, Last Rites, The Return of Sebastian Vasilis, Book 1 in the Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter series. It was another freezing cold night in Boston, Massachusetts. The wind howled with a rage that said, "Don't come out of the office. Stay put, and brave me only if you dare." I dared. I was out of Jack Daniels. I got off duty from my part-time security job and went to the office that I called home to discover the empty bottle. I panicked. Life wasn't the same without my best friend. I bundled up in my warmest undergarments again. They were called Long Johns by some wiseacre a billion years ago, and the name stayed. I put on a thick flannel shirt, ski pants, a heavy jacket, and wrapped a scarf around my neck. I put the little flask in my coat pocket. It was empty, but wouldn't be for long. I put extra warm gloves on my hands and went to the door. God, I hated cold weather. I paused and looked back at my office, at the pathetic little room that had become my life since the separation. I should have picked up the papers and folders that were strewn about my desk, but I was in a hurry. It had been a whole 4 hours since I'd had my last drink. I couldn't stand how filthy the office was, but I didn't have the energy or the care to stop and clean it up. It was time to go. On the floor in front of the door were divorce papers that my wife wanted me to sign. They looked up and laughed, taunting me as I walked out. I popped a couple more vitamin C pills as I left. It was preventive maintenance against the elements. I breathed a sigh and left the room, shutting the light switch on my way out. I double-checked to make sure the door was locked. Someone might enter and steal the only thing I had of value, a 13-inch black and white television and the tiny DVD player that were on a TV stand beside my couch. I could make last call at O'Malley's if I hurried. O'Malley's was 3 blocks away, not far in the summer, but it seemed like 10 miles in the bitter cold and snow that was Boston on this Halloween night. I got to the bar and my mouth dropped. There were only 3 people sitting there, but one of them was Frankie Langella. Langella was a friend of my former partner's. He worked out every day and looked it. 6'1" of solid muscle. That fact made him arrogant and conceited. He wasn't attractive. He had a protruding forehead and a unibrow that would have made a good throw rug if he ever shaved it off. But the chiseled body made up for that with the women. "Hey, Van Helsing, you killed Dracula yet?" he said with a stupid smirk that I wanted to wipe off of his face. "I do have a stake in my pocket," I shot back. Not the best comeback, but I wasn't in the mood for playful banter. "How's Alex? I hear he's doing your wife lately." I clenched my fist and wanted to end his pathetic little life in the worst way, but I just sat at the bar and ordered a JD and Coke. Less Coke, more JD. "Yeah, you remember Alex from high school. He was on top of you in the wrestling mat. Now he's on top of your wife every night in your bed." I didn't say anything, just stared into his eyes with a hatred that would have killed the fight in a lesser man, but Langella wasn't about to stop. "What happened to you, Vincent? You had it made. Top flight detective, gorgeous wife, kids, the whole 9 yards. Now look at you." Just lucky, I guess. I handed the little flask to old man O'Malley. He obligingly filled it at no extra cost, as he always did to keep my business. Langella moved in for the kill. "I just got a promotion. They needed a new detective. I got your old job, Vincent." That was more than I could take. I swung at the bastard as hard as I could and sucker punched him on the chin. It didn't do me much good as he spun around and landed a blow which knocked me on my ass. "Hey, hey," old man O'Malley yelled. "Saints be praised, you two take that shit somewhere else." "Don't worry, Sam," Langella said as he spit on me while I was prone on the floor. "I was just leaving." Langella walked out the door. I got up. Even if I could have taken him, what would be the point? He was right anyway, and that hurt worse than any punch ever would. "Sorry, Sam, can I get another?" "Carl, last call was 5 minutes ago." He pointed at the clock. I got the distinct feeling that if I hadn't started a fight I was destined to lose, then he might have served me one more. I sighed and walked out the door slowly, checking both ways to make sure Langella was gone. I caught sight of my reflection in the window of an old abandoned clothing store. I'd had my hair cut earlier that day, and it was bad, cowlicks sticking up like a mohawk. I looked like the illegitimate brother of Johnny Rotten. Between the bad haircut and the moron with a badge, I left O'Malley's angry enough to take on the world. I wasn't drunk. I was completely plastered. Needless to say that when I got back to my office, I passed out on the couch. I don't know how long I was asleep before I felt the room shake and bolted upright. I took a quick look around, but everything seemed normal, so I settled back onto the couch. Then I felt the couch move again. This time the force was even more powerful. The glass on my door cracked, creating a jagged diagonal line through the sign that read, Paranormal Investigator. I shot straight up. My head was aching and my hands were shaking. The room shook more violently than before, and the glass on my door shattered into tiny pieces and fell to the floor. I jumped behind the couch. All I could think about was how unlikely it was to have an earthquake in Boston. I was trembling and had to work hard not to pee my pants. Then I heard a voice from the past. It was a voice that I couldn't possibly have heard since the creature that made it had died years ago, and by my own hand. Mr. Vincent. Who's there? I said. I looked around for a weapon. Come now, Mr. Vincent, I'm disappointed. A steak, I thought. I need a steak. I know that voice. You should know me. You killed me. I hesitated. Sebastian, is that you? I twisted and gazed along the walls. Nothing. Am I going schizophrenic? How could I be talking to a dead man that I couldn't see? I wasn't that drunk. I shouldn't have been hearing voices. You finally recognize me, old friend. You are not my friend, bloodsucker, I said as I continued to look for the source of the voice. At first I thought I was having a bad dream, but that voice, it wasn't in my head, but from somewhere in the room. Former bloodsucker, now incorporeal being thanks to you. He sounded angry. What are you saying? That you've become a ghost? I am saying that I am the spirit of Sebastian Vasilis. I peeked around the edge of the couch, but I couldn't see him. My eyes darted from one corner of the building to the next. And I haven't forgotten Maine. Have you forgotten Island Falls? Years ago? I peered around for him. Oh, I remembered Island Falls, Maine, where I thought I was rid of him for good. He was the most terrifying vampire that I had ever encountered, and the hardest one to destroy. The Roman Catholic priest for the church in Island Falls, Father Don Cheney, Jr., had contacted me about a vampire that was attacking his parishioners. Cheney looked a little evil himself. At 66, he was deathly thin and pale, with some brown streaks in what was left of his gray hair. His nose stuck out sharply on his thin face, as the skin under his high-set cheekbones sunk in. His lips were sinewy, and he looked malnourished. It was Father Cheney's description of what he was dealing with that led me to believe we were looking for Sebastian Vasilis. It was rumored that Sebastian was, in all actuality, Radus el Frumos, the brother of Vlad Tepes, the Impaler, Dracula. At the time, I only knew Sebastian by reputation. I knew that, due to his lineage, he was one of the strongest vampires that had ever lived. His kind never turned. They were born vampires. They had powers which, at that time, I could only imagine. I would find out later just how strong this bloodsucker was. I had never faced a vampire of his magnitude in my life. When I had agreed to take this job, I had gotten passed out drunk the night before the 5-hour ride to Island Falls. I was scared to death and thought I might not make it back alive. Father Cheney and I discovered that Sebastian was hiding in an old potato barn just outside of town. I went out at 10 a.m. the next day to destroy the bloodsucker. You never want to go at night. That would give them the upper hand. I used the crowbar from the trunk of my car to pry open the barn door as wide as I could. It had been boarded up so that no sunlight would get in. If I had been stronger, I could have opened that door all the way and just let the sun do its job. But that barn was boarded up good. The flashlight beam illuminated the coffin in the far corner of the building. I hadn't yet developed my greatest weapon, the sunstick. I crept up to the coffin. It was made from a dark, shiny wood. I lifted the lid off as slowly and silently as I could. I positioned the stake over the bloodsucker's heart. When I raised the mallet, I saw that it was upside down. Shit! The word escaped my lips, even though I knew that I shouldn't make any noise. I turned the stake over and looked at that hideous face. The bloodsucker opened his eyes. He hissed and bent forward to sit up. Sweat gushed from my pores. My arms and legs trembled. I shut my eyes and slammed the mallet onto the stake as quick and hard as I could. I stood there for the longest moment. Finally, I opened one eye. The coffin was filled with dust. The stake in my hand shook. I opened the other eye. I did it! I exclaimed with triumphant glee. I killed Sebastian Vasilis! I don't think so, a voice came from the shadows. When I heard that voice, the remaining blood drained out of my face. I turned around, shaking all over. There he stood, walking forward out of the shadows. I was tempted to reach for the flask of Jack Daniels I had in my coat pocket. I wanted to run out into the sunlight, but I stood, immobile with fear. I finally got my first look at the creature which had come back to haunt me. Before that night, I only knew Sebastian by reputation. In the 1950s, Sebastian would have been called a greaser. But his hair wasn't slick with Brill cream. It had the distinct putrid aroma of dead follicles that hadn't been washed in 600 years. Sebastian's face was long and his cheekbones high upon his thin face. The craggy lines that outlined his visage made his face appear even longer than it actually was. He looked like a gothic rock star, especially around the eyes. The dark pupils seared into the soul of whomever he stared at. They had an intensity that struck fear in all his victims, including me. "What the hell?" I shouted, petrified. "That wasn't me, imbecile," the bloodsucker said with an evil, contorted smile on his face. I was so scared that I dropped the stake and mallet, my only salvation in that barn. "What are you going to do?" Sebastian laughed. "Kill me with your bare hands?" I stooped, but he was faster than me. Sebastian bent down and scooped up the mallet and stake. It was the first of many times that I would see that condescending look on his face. "Who was that?" I asked as I looked at the coffin. "One of those parishioners of that church that you vowed to protect. I turned him into a vampire yesterday," he said. "Quite an easy kill, I might add." Sebastian handed me the mallet I had dropped. "Here," he said, laughing. He positioned the stake over his heart. "The moment you've been waiting for, Mr. Vincent. Go ahead. Drive it deep." The smell of blood curled from his mouth. I trembled so hard that I couldn't lift the mallet. "You've never killed one of us that wasn't in a coffin, have you, Mr. Vincent?" "No," I said, and it was true. I don't even know how I got the 3 coffin doors of the vampires I had killed before this one to open. My hands were so shaky. Most vampires laugh when they think of the fearless vampire killer, Carl Vincent. How was I supposed to kill one of the most dangerous vampires that ever lived? He had taken out more vampire hunter wannabes than I had taken out vampires, including Abraham Van Helsing. "Just lift the mallet, Mr. Vincent. You have one free shot." I stood face to face with this creature from hell. The stench of the creature's breath was unbearable, like the decay of over 600 years of rot. I tried to lift the mallet, but my arm was trembling so hard it fell from my grip and clattered onto the floor. I dropped down to my knees. "You're so pathetic." Sebastian bared his fangs and made an evil hissing noise. He pushed the collar of my coat aside. The gesture revealed a string of garlic around my neck. Sebastian jerked his head around and plugged his nose, gagging at the spice which could send him to hell. "This is only a temporary setback, you know," he said angrily. Then I finally found the nerve to reach into my jacket and pull out my gun. I noticed a bewildered look cross his face. Sebastian laughed. "That won't hurt me." Overconfidence would defeat this bloodsucker. I aimed for the wall behind his head and fired. The bullet hole let in a thin sliver of sunlight which burnt Sebastian's arm. "Ouch!" he recoiled. "You can't shoot enough holes to kill me." I wasn't listening to him. I was trying to steady my shooting hand as I would only get one more shot at this. Sebastian noticed I was concentrating on a certain part of the ceiling around him. He turned and saw the big window I was aiming for. When he realized what I was doing, he lunged for me. I fired. Bullseye! The bullet hit the lock that I aimed for and the window fell open, letting in all that glorious sunlight. It was with this kill that my confidence started to build. The 3, or 4 if you include the parishioner that I had just staked, that I killed had been young vampires, newly turned. Sebastian had been a vampire for over 600 years, and he wasn't turned into a vampire. His kind was born vampires. This was the most significant kill I had made since I became a vampire. Wait, did I say 4? It's actually 5, if you count the first vampire I had ever killed, but that's another story for another time. Now it was my turn to have a shit-eating grin on my face. I watched Sebastian scream in agony as he burned up before my very eyes. I knew that I'd never see him again, except now he had returned. I couldn't believe several years had passed and this parasite found a way to torment me again. As I looked around the couch, the outline of his unearthly shape formed and filled in as he materialized in front of me. "Have you come back to haunt me?" I asked. "You mortals are so vain. Why must everything be about you?" "Well, why are you here then?" "I'm here to warn you, Mr. Vincent. Forces of darkness are about to be unleashed upon this planet unlike any you have ever seen." Why would you warn me? I didn't trust him for 1 second. Why would you, who revel in the destruction of human beings, all of a sudden turn over a new leaf and try to warn me about forces that you are a part of? Shouldn't you be happy about something like this? "In order for me to find eternal rest, I have to help you destroy these creatures that will come to life, or to prevent their resurrection." One creature has already been resurrected, the Hebrew vampire Lilith. I'm not your man. Most of the vampires I've killed, other than you, were asleep. Yes, I must say it was quite embarrassing to elude death for so many years, only to be destroyed by the likes of you. I don't think he would have been satisfied with any vampire hunter as his killer, but he was right. I was the bottom of the barrel in the world of vampire hunters. I'm surprised that I haven't been killed, or worse yet, turned by one of the bloodsuckers. "But you have a special knack others in your field don't have," he continued. "Forget it. Find another sucker. Mr. Vincent, you have to help. The world is depending on you." "It ain't happening. You ain't even tangible. How do you plan on paying me?" "If you don't help, I will haunt you for the rest of your miserable life, which won't be long if you refuse." I had to think that one over. I didn't like this bastard. I sure didn't want him around. I wanted him gone that day. "What exactly do you expect me to do?" "As I have said, the vampire Lilith has already been resurrected. We have to go to Cairo to prevent the resurrection of the Egyptian Sekhmet." "You expect the 2 of us to go against an army of Setite vampires?" "There will be more than 2 of us, Mr. Vincent. If Sekhmet is resurrected, then she and Lilith will become involved in a ritual that will unite all vampires. They will become more powerful than they are now." "Another diabolical plot to destroy mankind," I said sarcastically. "This is no laughing matter, Mr. Vincent." All right, what do we have to do?" "Prevent the resurrection of Sekhmet." "And if we fail?" "Then there will only be one more chance." Sebastian's look and tone became serious. "Prevent the resurrection of the Hindu Kali. If all 3 are resurrected, they will form an evil female trinity that will be unstoppable. Vampires will become many times more powerful than they are now. Mr. Vincent, vampires will be able to come out in sunlight." That shocked me. Sunlight? The armies of Lilith, Setite, and Tantric vampires moving around in the sunlight? But how could I trust this bloodsucker? "You said that we wouldn't be alone," I asked him. I finally agreed to join him. I only agreed because I was tired. I just wanted him to leave and let me return to sleep. I would have agreed to dance naked on top of the Empire State Building at that moment, just to get him to leave and get back to my bed. "That's correct. We will have many warriors to aid us in our noble quest." "Stop being so cliched," I laughed. "That's my job."